성령의 불이 타오르게 하라. 하나님의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라. 기도의 불이 타오르게 하라. 성령의 불이 타오르게 하라. 하나님의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라. 성령의 불이 타오르게 하라. 하나님의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라. 기도의 불이 타오르게 하라. 성령의 불이 타오르게 하라. 하나님의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라. 하늘의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라. 하늘의 군대를 부르라. 여호와로 일하시게 하라.
할렐루야. 주님께서 우리를 구원하셨습니다. 주님께서 우리를 이 자리에 불러주셨습니다. 예수님께서 우리를 위해 십자가에 달려 돌아가시고 우리에게 구원을 주셨음에도 우리가 바로 천국에 가지 않고 이곳에 남아있는 이유는 아직 예수님을 알지 못해 구원 얻지 못한 자들에게 예수님을 알게 하여 구원 얻게 하라고 하심을 믿습니다. 우리가 주님 앞에 찬양하고 기도하며 나아갈 때 주님께서 우리에게 주신 기쁜 소식을 널리 전파하며 선포하며 주님을 높여드리는 그런 시간이 되기를 소원합니다. 우리 기쁜 마음으로 주님 앞에 이 찬송 드리며 나아가십시다. 함께 찬양하십시다. 저 바다보다 또 더 넓고 저 산과 하늘보다 더 높은 주님의 은혜가 이곳에 가득해. 아멘. 살아계신 주 나의 하나님 언제나 넘치는 주의 사랑으로 내 안에 가득히 넘쳐 흐르네. 내게 강같은 평화, 내게 강 같은 평화, 내게 강 같은 평화가 넘치네. 내게 강 같은 평화, 내게 강 같은 평화, 내게 강 같은 평화가 넘치네. 아멘. 다시 한번 저 바다보다 또 더 넓고 저 산과 하늘보다 더 높은 주님의 은혜가 이곳에 가득해.
넘치는 주의 사랑으로 내 안에 가득히 넘쳐 흐르네. 내 바다 같은 내게 바다 같은 사랑, 내게 바다 같은 사랑, 내게 바다 같은 사랑이 넘치네. 할렐루야. 내게 바다 같은 사랑, 내게 바다 같은 사랑, 내게 바다 같은 사랑이 넘치네. 다시 한번 고백할게요. 저 바다보다 또 더 넓고 저 산과 하늘보다 더 높은 주님의 은혜가 이곳에 가득해. 살아계신 주 나의 하나님, 살아계신 주 나의 하나님,
언제나 넘치는 주의 사랑으로 내 안에 가득히
넘쳐 흐르네. 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨이 넘치네. 할렐루야. 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨이 넘치네. 한 번 더 고백합니다. 내게 샘솟는, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨이 넘치네. 할렐루야. 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨, 내게 샘솟는 기쁨이 넘치네. 이 기쁜 소식을 온 세상 전하세. 큰 환난 고통은 당하는 자에게 주 믿는 성도들 다 전할 소식은 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 내 주에 보내 성령이 오셨네. 이 기쁜 소식을 온 세상 전하세. 성령이 오셨네. 만왕의 왕께서 저 사로잡힌 자 자구 원하시고 잠자유 주셨네. 승리의 노래가 온 성에 들리니 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 내 주에 보내신 성령이 오셨네. 이 기쁜 소식을 온 세상 전하세. 성령이 오셨네. 한없는 사랑과 그 크신 은혜를 의심하면서 안 믿는 자에게 내 작은 입으로 고튼 원하리. 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 성령이 오셨네. 내 주에 보내신 성령이 오셨네. 이 기쁜 오셨네 내 주에 보내신 성령이 오셨네 이 기쁜 소식을 온 세상 전하세 성령이 이 기쁜 소식을 온 세상 전하세 성령이 오셨네
선포하라
부활하신 영광의 주 아름다운 영광의 주를 보라 보좌에 앉으신 그 어린 양 예수 다 무릎 꿇고서 주 경배하리라 하시면 선포하라 부활하신 영광의 주 부활하신 영광의 주 하나님과 화목하게 하신 주 화목하게 하신 주 찬송과 존귀와 영광과 능력을 영원토록 받아주옵소서 보좌에 앉으신 보좌에 앉으신 어린 양 예수님 그 어린 양 예수 다 무릎 꿇고서 주 경배하리라 주 경배하리 다시 한 번 더 보좌에 앉으신 주님 보좌에 앉으신 그 어린 양 예수 다 무릎 꿇고서 주 경배하리라.
이 시간 다시 한번 고백할 때는 우리 좀 다른 민족의 언어로 고백했으면 좋겠습니다. 예수님께서 하나님과 동등됨을 취할 것을 여기지 아니하시고 이 땅에 오셔서 사람의 몸이 되시고 우리가 알아들을 수 있는 말로 사랑한다라고 말씀하신 것 같이 이제는 우리가 좀 다른 민족을 위해 우리가 기도하는 민족을 위하여 정말 그들의 언어로 찬양했으면 좋겠습니다. 하나님 정말 그 땅의 그 민족이 그들의 언어로 한 분이신 하나님을 높이며 나가게 하여 주시옵소서. 주님만이 온 땅과 열방 가운데 주님 되심을 고백합니다. 하나님 우리가 드리는 이 고백을 통하여 하나님 그 땅에도 정말 하나님을 찬양하고 하나님 높여드리는 그 찬송이 가득하게 하여 주시옵소서. 우리 그 마음 가지고 이 고백 다시 한번 드려보겠습니다.
손수주 보윤자
손수주 보윤자
한 번만 더 고백합시다. 손수술 보윤자, 손수술 보윤자, 다 주제린 대신 세빈죄니 조금 살았다 부르서 보좌에 앉으신 보좌에 앉은 어린 양 예수님, 그 어린 양 예수, 그 어린 양 예수, 다 무릎 꿇고서 주경배하리라. 다시 한 번 더 보좌에 앉으신 주님을 찬송합니다. 보좌에 앉으신 어린 양, 그 어린 양 예수, 그 어린 양 예수, 다 무릎 꿇고서 주경배라. 찬송과 존귀와 영광과 능력은, 찬송과 존귀와 영광과 능력은 주님을 높임 받으소서. 예배 가운데 함께 하소서. 영원 받아주고. 마지막 다시 한번 선포합시다. 찬송과 영광과 능력을, 찬송과 존귀와 영광과 능력을 영원토록 받아주옵소서. 받아주옵소서. 보좌에 앉으신 그 어린 양 예수, 그 어린 양 예수, 다 무릎 꿇고서 주경배하리라. 하나만 더 고백합시다. 보좌에 앉으신 어린 양 예수님, 보좌에 앉으신 주님 이곳 가운데 오시옵소서. 우리 예배 가운데 함께 하시옵소서. 다 무릎 꿇고서 주경배하리라. 이곳에 오셔서, 이곳에 앉으소서. 이곳에 앉으소서. 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 받으소서. 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 받으소서. 주님의 이름만이, 오직 주의 이름만 이곳에. 다시 한번 우리 마지막으로 마음을 다해서 고백합시다. 이곳에 오셔서 이곳에 앉으소서. 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 받으소서. 주님의 이름만이, 오직 주의 이름만 이곳에 있음.
사랑하는 기도 동역자 여러분, 평안하셨습니까? 7월입니다. SWM 선교회는 매해 7월부터 그 다음에 6월까지 회계연도가 진행되는 여러분의 교회나 회사와는 약간 다른 구조를 가지고 저희들이 이제 막 연말 계획들을 다 마치고 새해를 맞이했습니다. 7월에 현장 이슈로 여러분에게 소개하는 우리 귀한 선교사님 가정이 있습니다. 터키 디야르바크르에서 오랫동안 사역하신 제리 그리고 사라 매틱스 선교사님 가정을 여러분께 오늘 소개하고 싶습니다. 마침 미국을 여행하시면서 동역하는 동역자들과 동역교회를 방문하신 두 분을 오늘 SWM 선교회 Anaheim 오피스에 모시게 되었습니다. 두 분의 이야기를 좀 듣고 어떻게 하나님 나라를 먼저 선택한 그런 선교사의 삶을 사시게 되었는지 저희가 한번 듣고, 또 하나님께서 터키와 중동에서 어떻게 일하시는지 우리가 한번 들으면서 우리가 살고 있는 이 시대가 어떤 시대인가 우리가 한번 다시 한번 생각하는 그런 귀한 시간 갖기를 원합니다. Hey Jerry and Sarah,
Hi.
it's good to meet you again.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
We're privileged to be with you.
Yeah, I remember my first visit in Diyarbakir, and I still remember the guest room, the behind the church.
Oh, right.
There's a small guest room, so Peter and I, we have a privilege to stay there for a few days.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful.
Okay.
And it was a first church in Diyarbakir, and I have a chance to visit you the next day in your new office.
Oh, right.
You remember?
That's right,
in the
remember.
new city?
Right.
Yeah, so I visited and you showed me the cross the street building. There is a AK Party,
Right.
Diyarbakir branch.
Right.
That surprised me too.
Right.
So I have a very good feeling. And always when I visit to Turkey, I remember my friends in Turkey. And Jerry and Sarah, you are the one of the biggest friend in Turkey.
Well, thank you.
For
Ron.
us.
Thank you.
But unfortunately, Turkish government doesn't allow you stay in Turkey in 2013, I think.
Right.
And you pray. I know you pray a lot. You pray, and finally you decide to move into North Cyprus.
Right.
Yeah, it was about 15, 16 years after you become a missionary in Turkey, right?
Right. That's correct.
Okay. Jerry and Sarah, I heard that you are MK, missionary kids, both of them.
That's right.
That's right.
And tell us about your story and your family story so we could see what you did for the last years.
Yes.
Jerry, why don't you start with you?
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, those first few years of my life were very instructive. My father went to Bolivia, South America, as a missionary when he was young, 19 years old.
Wow.
And later married, took my mom down, and all 5 of us siblings were born in Bolivia. And so I have dual citizenship. And, you know, I think it's a testimony to my mother and father and their faithfulness to the Lord and their love for God and for our family, that all of us, with the exception of my one brother, have ended up on the mission field as well. So they really instilled upon us a great passion for God's work. And so when I went to Bible college in Dubuque, Iowa, Emmaus Bible College, I already had the desire to go and serve God overseas. But of course, my whole focus was South America because I speak Spanish, which is my mother tongue.
Where did you study?
So I went to Emmaus Bible College to study missions and theology. But it was there that I met my dear wife, Sarah, at the registration line. She came up and started talking to me in Spanish. So that was the immediate connection. So we had the romantic language going on right from the beginning. And again, she also, well, you can speak for yourself and where you grew up.
Yeah, so my family, though originally from the U.S., also when I was about 8 or 9 years old, moved to Mexico. My dad was a church planter and served there for many years, I think close to 30 years. They served in Mexico and were planting probably 3 or 4 churches. And then after that, they moved to Spain. and they served there as well. And so yes, the same as Jerry, my parents really instilled in me a real passion for Jesus and a real passion for missions and sharing Christ. So from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to serve God. I didn't know how or where, but I definitely loved Jesus and wanted to serve him.
So we met at Emmaus Bible College, and it was actually in that first semester that we became aware of, maybe for the first time, the need among the Muslim people in the rest of the world. Our whole focus had been South America, the Hispanic world, but that's where the Lord touched our hearts. It was a new avenue, and we were both very young, 18, and that was our first introduction to the rest of the world, as it were, especially the Kurdish people. For one reason or another, one of our missions professors kept emphasizing the great need among this greatest unreached people group, right, the Kurdish people. And so I began to do some research. Sarah as well. We became very good friends and did some research papers on that subject. And again, just over and over, the Lord kept touching us in that way. At the end of my second year, I actually went to Turkey by myself as a 19-year-old, similar to my dad, and wanted to see it for myself. I'd never been across the Pacific or the Atlantic in that case. And so I decided to go across to Turkey, meet some of these missionaries that I had corresponded with. And I had an opportunity to see Turkey for the first time and travel around. And again, just a greater sense and burden of, yes, I would love to come and serve and reach these people who are so unreached. And Turkey, especially of all the Muslim countries, it was the only open country, right?
When was the year?
This was 1998.
1998 is the year you visited Turkey.
Yes, I visited Turkey. And in fact, I ended up going to Diyarbakir. So I come to Diyarbakir with George Bristow, a good friend of ours, a mentor. And we went and met Pastor Ahmet. And they had recently purchased this old, torn up building across from the Meryamana Orthodox Church in the old city of Diyarbakir. And they had wanted to use it as a church building, but it was so decrepit, so old, they were asking George, who is an architect, can we rebuild this place or should we just level it and start again? And George came and took one look at the building and said, no, you need to level it, and better to start on again because this place is unusable. And I remember there standing in that church, and Ahmet said, so Jerry, what do you think? I was just a young man coming along with George, and would you like to come and help us? And I said, well, I'd love to come and help you. Wow. And he said, well, come on over, we'd love to have you. Well, little did I know that he says this to everybody who comes, right? But nobody comes. He said this hundreds of times to people, and nobody ever comes back. And so he was really just joking, So a few years later, when I showed up again, he was surprised, And I said, well, you invited me, right? And he said, well, I was kind of joking, but I'm really glad you came. So, of course, the rest of the story is we went back, and my wife and I by then were dating and were serious about getting married. But even before we got married, our goal and our purpose was set on Turkey, to come to serve the Lord in Turkey. Everybody joked about it, these two people that are still under 20 and yet already decided the rest of their life. Wow. But it had become that clear for us. There was an earthquake, of course, later in 1999, and we helped to support that. And by the end of 99, we were married at our Bible college. We didn't settle in the U.S. We just saved all our money because we wanted to go to Turkey. And so we went back to our home church in Washington State, and we approached our elders again, said, we've been talking about Turkey all these years. And they said, well, take a year to get used to marriage. And for our first anniversary, we went back to Turkey, this time together.
For my first time.
It was her first time there. And that was a real shock. We went in the winter, it was Ramadan, no food, right? We took a long bus ride from Izmir to Van, 24 hours.
Van.
Yeah,
Wow.
From the west to the east, 24 hours on that bus, and nobody's eating, no one's drinking. And it was cold, it was frigid up there, in the middle of winter. We ended up coming back to Diyarbakir. And at that point, I had told my wife, I said, we know the Lord wants us to come to Turkey. We don't know when or when we will be ready for this. But I said, well, what if the Lord opens the doors and he says now, right? And she said, well, I'm not ready. I'm thinking of a couple years down the road, get ourselves prepared. She really didn't feel like that was the time. But she said to me,
I said, if God works in my heart, I'll be ready. And that's exactly what God did. By the end of our time in Diyarbakir, I had had a lot of prayer times with him, and God was really softening my heart and really giving me a passion and a love for the people of Diyarbakir. And so by the time we left, I still remember I was on the bus and I was crying because I didn't want to leave. That's how much I loved. And I was looking around at the land. You know, the land outside of Diyarbakir is not beautiful at all. It's just rocks and desert. And I was looking at it, but I loved it so much. And so God really changed my heart and said, Sarah, you're going to go now. Now, like as soon as possible. So we both agreed that that's what God was
The challenge was that we needed to convince our elders
that we were
these
ready.
20-year-old young
we're
couple
very
was ready to go to the missions field, you know. So we came back to our elders, and we firmly believed, based on Acts chapter 13, when Paul and Barnabas are sent out, that the Holy Spirit confirms his calling to those responsible. So even though we felt that call very deeply and we were ready to do that, we were also committed to the fact that if our elders who are spiritually responsible for us, if they didn't agree with that calling, if the Spirit did not confirm it to them as well, then we should not go. That's something that we've seen over and over throughout the years. You know, people have come out to the mission field on a sense of calling, whether it's a sense of duty or emotion or whatever it is, genuine or otherwise. If they have come, but without the support of those who are responsible for them, and sooner or later they go back. It's unsustainable. And so we approached our church elders, and they had been, you know, preparing us and guiding us throughout this whole process. And we said, listen, we feel like the time is now. Of course, their mouths were wide open, and they're staring at us like, now? Like, yeah, this summer, we really feel that God wants us to go. There's a place we can stay. There's an older couple that is willing to mentor us, a place we can learn the language and get a visa. And, you know, everything had lined up so beautifully. But we said, we're committed to respecting your decision. And so we had 5 elders in our church, and they took a couple weeks to pray about this. And then finally, we all got back together. And one by one, all 5 of these, you know, who would listen to us, they said, really, we've seen your commitment from the beginning, 2 or 3 years now of praying for this, preparing for this, and now going and faithfully pursuing this vision. We believe this is God's will. But it came down to one last elder. And he had recently become an elder, Brother David. And Brother David says, you know, I've always thought you guys were crazy. This is insane. You know, who do you think you are? You're going away to the other side of the world? You know, you're going to save the world? This is craziness, you know? Why are you, you're young, you know, 21 years old. He really thought this was really insane. But he said, you know, I've been praying about this for the last couple of weeks, and I just can't shake it that God is calling you. God is sending you. From a human perspective, this is insanity, but I believe that this is God's will. And for us, that was the confirmation we needed, because we had committed, you know, unless all 5 of our elders are on board, we don't want to go on our own sense of emotion. We felt, you know, we were very passionate about this, but we wanted to be sure it wasn't just our own feelings, but that it was God confirming that call. Now, there were plenty others who thought we were crazy in our church. You know, we didn't have money. We didn't have all the things that you need typically, but we were committed now. We knew that God had confirmed that call. And so we began to just trust Him, and we got rid of everything, and God began to provide from places we didn't even know, and we had enough for a ticket, and then we moved on out to Izmir.
How long it took after you submit your proposal to the church?
About 8 months.
8 months, yeah.
Yeah. So by August, we were back in Turkey. And, you know, we came to Turkey. And one of the things that we did, I think, was really wise in retrospect. We took the model of Timothy. You know, he was a young, passionate, you know, missionary who wanted to serve, but he was careful to work under the Apostle Paul. Sure. And to be taken under his wing and to learn from him. And so, being that we were very young, we went to Turkey and we began to work under an older couple who were mentors to us, and we spent a whole year learning the language, and that was really key. Both of us are MKs, you know, and we've grown up in the middle, in the mission field, and we've often seen missionaries who have been there 15, 20 years and still struggling with the language.
That's right.
And it becomes an embarrassment for them, not to mention, I think, a stumbling block to others. And so we were committed. If we're going to be in this country, we're going to call it home. This is going to be our home. Our kids are going to be born and raised here, and they're going to love it. And we want to learn this language just like the locals. So we're going to do whatever we need to do to make that happen.
How was it?
Well, we worked on it really hard. You know, it was difficult at the beginning, but Jerry especially is very gifted with languages, and I think I did pretty well as well.
She was pregnant with our first daughter and still did great.
And so by 1 year, you know, after 1 year, we had studied and committed a whole year just to language. And so we really embraced the language, and that was a good decision, I think.
It's so important because, you know, so often in missions, it's easy to learn just enough to get by and to begin ministering, but not really perfect it. And I think that's a mistake we can make. We really need to fully commit. And in the case of Turkish, you know, we got there and we took it on as a full job. You know, I saw myself being supported by the local church to be here, so I'm going to put in 8 hours a day. And so that meant, you know, going to university, taking my classes, coming home, taking my vocabulary list seriously, going out to neighbors, meeting people, and at least 8 hours a day of focusing on that language. And if I was not in the mission field, I'd be here with an 8-hour job, right? So I need to really give it everything I've got. And the Lord honored that, and we got enough in that first year where we could really communicate. Of course, you never have it entirely. You're always learning more, right? Sure. But after, about 10 months in Izmir, our calling from the beginning had been the Southeast. And so this is when we loaded everything up in an old watermelon truck. My wife asked me, "Do you think this is going to make it?" And I said, "Well, I hope so." And we headed out to southeastern Turkey, to Diyarbakir, the largest city in eastern Turkey, mainly a Kurdish population, and showed up to see Ahmet and the elders there. And you know, by now we had communicated, and he knew we were coming, of course. But they were delighted to have us, and we were delighted to be there. And again, we put ourselves under their leadership. We said, "We're here to serve you and to do what you feel the local church needs." Initially, when we came to Turkey, we came with the mentality that many of us have from the West of, "I'm going to come and plant a church." Well, we've realized over time just how short-sighted that can be, not to mention a little bit bigoted. You know, who are we to think that we know how to do it? You know, there's local believers there that have been working on this for decades and are struggling to do this. What makes me think I can just jump out of Bible college and come and do it, right? Thankfully, we got some good advice from some older workers and came and submitted ourselves to the local leaders and said, "We want to serve you. We want to work under you." And it offered us really good covering. It offered us a good opportunity to continue to mature and grow in our language skills and our culture acquisition, and also just spiritually in every area. And so it was a really sweet time. You know, about 12 years we served in Diyarbakir. By the end, I was an elder along with them, serving in the local church. But really, we grew up in that church and were mentored by these older pastors, Ahmet and Cengiz, and saw just a real fruitful season in Diyarbakir during those years. Saw the church go from a small home group to an established church building of 70, 80 believers on a regular Sunday, and multiplying and growing and starting new churches along with them. So the vision that we acquired over time was not, instead of us, we're going to go plant a church, let's come and plant the church with the local church. Let's work together towards a common goal. Let's give that vision on to them. Because at the end of the day, we don't know how long we will be able to stay. And as it turned out, we only had 12 years there, which was a joy. Every year of that, every day of that was a great privilege for us.
Year 2012, we have a prayer meeting in Ankara, and I have a chance to invite you as a guest speaker. And in the meeting, prayer meeting, I remember that it's more than close to 100 Turkish people there, and everyone say they thought you are Turkish. So I'm so glad to hear that. They don't feel the difference from your sermon and the preaching and the report. I'm so glad that, and you have experience to took care of the earthquake in around the Van. I remember your report. Your report say that just give them bread instead of you give them a bread and you ask them accept Jesus. You suggested don't do that. You just give them a bread.
Just
that's
the
what
act
they
of
need.
showing
Share
them
with
love
me a little
and
bit
sharing.
about the earthquake.
It's really important that we don't have strings attached to our to whatever humanitarian aid we give people. If we're saying, "Well, give you bread if you will take also my faith," then that's not really fair, and I think it gives a wrong impression that we are going to continue to support them if they become Christians, and that's not true, and that's not helpful. So we wanted just to very simply love them, and they already know you're a Christian if you're a foreigner, and just that very act, especially with no strings attached, I think speaks volumes in and of itself. And it was a beautiful thing to be able to serve alongside the local church, under the auspices of the local church there in Vaughan for that time. And we did this, in a number of other places as well. In Bingöl, there was an earthquake years earlier. And whenever there are practical needs like this, later on with refugees, a great opportunity to just serve in the name of Jesus.
No, it is important. About the earthquake in Vaughan, have you ever a chance to involve with Jerry?
Oh, when the earthquake happened? No, I did not go up there.
Okay. But you have a chance to invite the church in Vaughan members, a White family or another church members, and
Yeah, they came and visited us, and we were very involved by just the support from afar, but I had really little kids at that point, so my little kids were they were very small, so it was very hard for me to leave home at that point.
That's right. Okay, wonderful. You just mentioned a few ministries in Turkey, and tell me about the ministry in Turkey before you leave.
Well, God was working on many different levels. We were on the southeastern corner, but as Ahmet Abi would always say, he would say that God's field is very big. We all work in a different corner of that field, but we're all working for the same master, and he is the owner of the harvest. And so we were just privileged to see the church blossom in those years. It was years when the church had more freedom. Erdogan today, we think of him as, anti-Christian and always causing trouble and all the rest. But in the early years, he was actually giving a lot of freedom to Christians and to groups, because he also wanted that freedom for his Muslim groups. And so for the first few years, we benefited greatly. Many churches were opened across the country, publicly ministering and worshiping. Many people began to openly, identify with Christianity by changing their ID. There were many ministries that were set up. I remember we had a big conference in which out of that came the prayer ministry, and out of that came youth ministry, which is what I spearheaded, the youth ministry, and now they're having regular conferences and youth training seminars. Out of that also, of course, there's been a very strong push to do children's ministry, and that's been very successful. Over 30 years, I think now, of strong children's ministry across the country. What started as one main camp in Ankara now is 5 or 6 camps across Turkey. So we've seen that church and that ministry multiply. We've seen the church, many of the churches in the southeast and Diyarbakir and Mardin especially, because they're open venues, people come regularly and just want to get a Bible, get a New Testament. So in Mardin, for example, you might get 100, 200 people a day on an average, just coming in, wanting a book, wanting a Bible. And this is where I got involved in writing. And so I began to write a lot of books and publish these and make them available to people for free. Also a lot of social media and internet online ministries, TV ministries began to develop, and local pastors, myself included, were now had the courage to get on the camera and openly profess their faith. And again, the Lord has used this to spread the gospel across all of Turkey. So at every level, whether it's youth ministry, children's ministry, online ministry, women's ministry as well, the Turkish church has become really very strong, and it's been a beautiful thing to see that blossom and grow.
Thank you. Sarah, when you were in Diyarbakir, you began to involve the women's ministry. And you have a wonderful ministry in North Cyprus as well. Can you tell us a little bit about women's ministry in Turkey?
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues in Turkey, of course, is that women do not have as many rights and especially women who come from Muslim backgrounds. They've been really, I guess, put down their whole life. They've always felt like they're not good enough, and because women in Turkey, especially in the southeast even more, they've really been oppressed over the years. So a lot of my vision and my heart was always to reach out to the broken women, and I began to do that more than anything from my home in Diyarbakir. I would have women over. I met a lot of women. Women would suddenly just want to come and talk with me, and I was able to pray with a lot of women over the years who were Muslims, but they also knew that they could trust me, and they also believed that praying for them in Jesus' name, they saw differences, and so they really wanted prayer. So that's what I began to do while I was there. Yeah.
When you do the women's ministry, especially hearing their story, and you have tell them your story with the Bible, your ability of the language does really help at the point, I think.
Of course, yeah. It was very important that I had language. I'm really thankful I had a really good grasp of Turkish so that I could share with the women and so that I could understand the vocabulary that they were using and also be able to identify and empathize with a vocabulary that they also understood. So it was really important.
You are not 50 yet, a little over 40s, and I have two suggestions. Who has a heart for the Lord, and especially young people, and why don't you encourage them? What is your life you choose for the Lord for last 20 plus years, and what is the message for the next young generation here in America and also over the world? Same question for Sarah.
Do you have an answer?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I must say, I don't regret for once, the decision we made to commit our life to Jesus and to walk after him, to follow him. It's been an adventure every step of the way. There's been high points, there's been low points. There was the day we buried 3 friends in Malatya, martyred for Christ. But we can also look back and see churches that have been established, the gospel has gone out, thousands of Bibles and New Testaments distributed, and so many lives that are transformed, and now have the joy of seeing these Afghan and Yazidi girls have a new life. There's nothing like it. It's just such a joy to know that what you're doing has eternal value. And so I don't regret it for one moment. I do see that it's difficult in today's modern age, so many competing alliances and allegiances in our lives, and yet there's nothing as amazing and exciting as following Jesus and letting him use you to transform this world for good and to do create genuine, positive, eternal, lasting change in the lives of others. And it changes you, of course. It expands you as an individual and enriches your life. And even though it's been maybe challenging for us as a couple to live overseas, for our children to be growing up overseas, at the end of the day, we wouldn't regret it. We wouldn't change anything for a moment. And the only thing we regret is not being more passionate for Christ. We regret not following him even closer, not praying more, not being more committed to him and his word. But everything that we've done in his cause has been to our great joy and benefit, and we're privileged to do so.
Wonderful. Sarah?
I would tell young women and young men that it's never too late to say yes to Jesus, yes to what he actually has called them to do. For me, saying yes each time to God's calling in my life, I've never regretted it. When I said yes to Turkey, when I said yes to North Cyprus, when I said yes to Iraq and Afghanistan and all these places that for a woman like me, I was very shy. I was not incredibly gifted in speaking maybe. I had a lot of insecurities, but I wanted to show Jesus' love to others. And I knew that's all, if I could only do that, that's all I wanted to do. And so I would just encourage the young people to say, just say yes and see what God's going to do in their life. Because it can be hard, but it's so much more exciting to see Him working through us when we are just His vessels. It's a beautiful thing.
Wonderful. Oh, when I'm thinking about you, Jerry, you are the very weird American.
Yeah.
Because you were born in Bolivia and grew up there until age 18 and come to America only a few years.
Yeah.
And moved to Turkey and North Cyprus. Now you are 48 and you spent only 4 years in America. But God is using you wonderful way. Even you give up comfort life in America, but God is using you in God's field.
Well, I'm only 43, but
Sorry.
but I think one of the great things to learn in life is obviously we're all unique, and God can use our uniqueness. He can leverage all of that for His kingdom, for His glory. The fact that I have this background of having grown up as an MK in South America has been a great benefit to me, having another language, having another culture. I've never felt like I've had to leave anything because I have everything to gain. I've never missed life in the United States. And as much as I love and miss my culture in Bolivia, in a way I've fallen in love with Turkey and all that has to offer. So everything that God has done in my life, the background, the history, all the unique and the quirkiness, and God uses all those things in interesting ways. He weaves it together, and so I think it's just a joy to allow Him to fit us in. We're like a puzzle piece, and there's a unique place where we can all be used of Him. And so there's, it might seem weird for someone, that I've left America. I feel like I've not left anything. I've just gained so much by following Christ and allowing Him to use me in these interesting and amazing ways. It's really all His doing. Yeah.
Sarah, to compare with your friends in America, your life is very different from their life and the life they choose. What you say?
Well, I'm glad I chose what I did. I know that much. I love my friends in America. I'm so much like Jerry that, I left America when I was 8 years old, and I didn't come back until I was 18, and then I left after a few years again. So when I come to America, I don't necessarily feel like I fit in anyway. So a lot of things are strange for me here. But at the same time, something that I value about America is how they faithfully prayed for me and my family, how they faithfully support us, how they faithfully are behind us. And whenever we come back, they embrace us and love us. And that makes us feel that we're not forgotten, because it can be lonely on the field. I mean, that is one thing, it can be lonely. In terms, their life is very different. I mean, I have two sisters here also, and my brother, and their life is very different from mine. But they love Jesus, and they pray for me. And that's what we have in common, our love for the Lord.
Wonderful. Finally, let's share your prayer request for your family and the ministry.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, obviously we're taking care of all these Afghan girls now, and we're going to add another 8 or 10 girls. And so we're just praying God will keep providing for them and protect them and bring them over safely, and that they will come to know Him. That's our real greatest desire for them. We want to continue to serve the local church effectively. We want to see local leaders raised up in a place like Cyprus, where there's such a turnaround of people regularly. We want to see some local families established as local leaders there. And just for continued unity and working together with different people in that city.
I know you are in the middle of a trip to cross the country, and you end up by Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, we pray God will bless you at this trip, and you go back to North Cyprus. You could invite us
Yes, of
for
course.
your ministry.
You're very welcome to come. We'd love to have you. We'd
Wonderful.
love to have you.
All right. Thank you for your time, Sarah and Jerry. And we miss you a long time, but I'm so glad to see you here in Anaheim.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
예, 오늘 귀한 선교사님 내분을 통해서 하나님께서 선교 현장에서 하시는 귀한 일들을 듣게 되면 감사합니다. 제리매틱스 부분을 통해서 하나님께서 볼리비아에서 또 멕시코에서 터키에서 이제 사이프스에서 하시는 하나님의 놀라운 새로운 일들을 우리가 듣게 되고 또 이것을 위해서 오늘 우리가 마음에 품고 간절히 기도하기를 원합니다. 많은 사역자들이 사실 추방하면 사역의 끝이라고 생각을 하고 좀 이렇게 두려움에 쌓여 있는데 사실 사역자들에게 그 나라에서 물론 떠나는 것은 아쉽고 힘들지만 이 추방이라는 그러한 그 통동을 통해서 하나님께서 더 놀랍고 더 큰 하나님의 일들을 입체적으로 하시는 것들을 우리가 제리매틱스 사역자의 또 많이 추방된 선교사님들의 삶과 사역에서 들을 수 있습니다. 오늘 우리 제리매틱스 사역자 가정을 위해서 화면을 보시면서 이 가정과 또 그분들의 사역들 또 계속해서 이어지는 기도 제목을 우리 품고 우리 주님의 이름 주여 한번 크게 간절히 부르고 우리가 간절히 합심해서 기도하겠습니다. 주여! 아버지 감사합니다. 오늘 귀한 우리 제리매틱스 사역자를 통해서 하나님께서 멕시코에서 볼리비아에서 터키에서 사이프스에서 감사합니다. 모든 영광도 존경하는 하나님의 지수가 드러내는 터키와 중동 그리고 이슬람권의 일을 일통으로 더 많이 보내주시고 세워주시고 주시옵소서. 마지막 시대에 하나님의 부르심에 예스하고 순종하는 세대들 청년들 넥스트 제너레이션 가운데 세워주시고 이슬 같은 새벽 이슬 같은 청년들이 주님의 마음으로 이 크리스마스 이슬 나갈 수 있어서 역사하여 주시옵소서. 예수 그리스도의 관심을 갖는 수많은 복음 가정자 이슬람을 선동하고 하나님의 것을 세워주시고 터키 정부가 외국 사역자들에게 계속 지역교회 새로운 변화, 새로운 사고가 임재 하늘의 문을 여소서 다 같이 찬양하시고 우리가 기도함으로 축도함으로 마치겠습니다. 하늘의 문을 여소서
하늘의 문을 여소서 이곳을 주목하소서 주를 향한 노래가 꺼지지 않으리 하늘을 열고 보소서 이곳에 임재하소서 주님을 기다립니다 기도의 향기가 하늘에 닿으니 아멘. 주여 임재하여 주소서 오셔서 이곳에 앉으소서 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 예배를 받으시옵소서 모든 영광과 존귀와 능력을 홀로 받으시옵소서 우리의 기도를 들으시옵소서 내 이름만이 오직 주의 이름만 이곳에 있음 우리 처음부터 다시 합니다. 하늘의 문을 여소서 하늘의 문을 여소서 이곳을 주목하소서 주를 향한 노래가 꺼지지 않으리 하늘을 열고 보소서 이곳에 임재하소서 주님을 기다립니다 기도의 향기가 하늘에 닿으니 주님 주여 임재하여 주소서 이곳에 오셔서 이곳에 앉으소서 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 받으소서 주님의 이름에 주님의 이름만이 오직 주의 이름만 이곳에 있음 이곳에 오소서 이곳에 오셔서 이곳에 앉으소서 이곳에서 드리는 예배를 받으소서 주님의 이름에 주님의 이름만이 오직 주의 이름만 이곳에 있습니다.
지금은 우리 주 예수 그리스도의 은혜와 독생자를 아끼지 아니하시고 우리를 위해 내어주신 하나님 아버지 그 놀라우신 사랑과 성령님의 감화감동 교제 충만하심이 오늘도 선교 현장에서 하나님께서 하시는 놀라운 일들을 보며 그것을 품고 기도한 하나님의 귀한 기도 동역자들 위해 그들의 가정과 그들의 자녀 위해 그들의 모든 삶의 범사 위해 지금도 이 천국 복음을 전하는 수많은 전도자들의 발걸음 위에 지금부터 영원토록 함께 하시기를 간절히 축원하옵나이다. 아멘. 기도를 마쳤습니다. 다음 주까지 영육간에 강건하시고 승리하시길 간절히 축원합니다. 감사합니다.
온 세상의 소망 되신 주님을 찬양합시다. 예수 열방의 소망, 예수 우리의 위로자, 주는 온 땅의 영원한 소망, 예수 어둠 속의 빛, 예수 변함없는 진리, 주는 온 땅의 빛이 되시네. 우리 위해 죽으시고 다시 사신 생명의 주, 우리 위해 죽으시고 다시 사신 생명의 주, 주님만이 소망이요 변함없는 반석이라, 주님만이 온 세상을 비추시네. 또 죽음에서 부활하신 우리 구주 평강의 왕, 주를 믿는 모든 자의 소망 되신 주를 믿네. 그래 다시 한번 고백하겠습니다. 예수 열방의 소망, 예수 우리의 위로자, 주는 온 땅의 영원한 소망, 예수 어둠 속의 빛, 예수 변함없는 진리, 주는 온 땅의 빛이 되시네. 우리 위해 죽으시고 다시 사신 생명의 주, 우리 위해 죽으시고 다시 사신 생명의 주, 주님만이 소망이요 변함없는 반석이라, 주님만이 온 세상을 비추시네. 또 죽음에서 부활하신 우리 구주 평강의 왕, 주를 믿는 모든 자의 소망 되신 주님만이 소망이요 변함없는 반석이라, 주님만이 온 세상을 비추시네. 또 죽음에서 부활하신 우리 구주 평강의 왕, 주를 믿는 모든 자의 소망 되신
기도합니다. 할렐루야. 주님 그 예배를 받아주시옵소서. 세상 가운데 주님 함께하여 주시옵소서. 네.